In today's episode of the Pathmonk Presents podcast, I got a very interesting guest here with me today. I'm with the Chief Marketing Officer of PayIt, Kelly Davis-Felner, and she's hailing over to tell us a little bit more about digital government services and payments, come together, how SaaS is helping to basically simplify a whole lot of situations in those scenarios, and how she's thinking about growth for PayIt. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Sure, yeah. So maybe give people an overview how you guys are, removing friction in the agency's customer experience and what PayIt is all about.
Sure. So the best way to think about PayIt is as kind of a customer experience platform that serves state, local, and provincial government agencies. So think of a county tax assessor or a city or a state. We make software that enables a resident to have kind of a modern consumer grade Amazon-like experience when they are transacting with their government. So if you think about things like renewing a driver's license, paying your property taxes or a utility bill, settling a court fine, things like that, all of that can be taken care of online in our platform. So it's obviously better for residents. Anybody who's used a government website recently, probably knows that sometimes they can be a little bit clunky. But the cool thing is it also helps the government agencies that we serve operate more efficiently. So they collect revenue faster, which means they can distribute into the community faster, serving libraries or firefighters or police or schools or whatever your tax dollars are kind of funding. And then they also save money in the process because it's much more efficient to collect that money online than it is when people, walk in, mail in, call in, et cetera.
Gotcha. Makes complete sense. Now, can you tell me a little bit more about sort of, who would be the people that champion the product within? Like who takes the plunge and, brings the product so sort of in-house?
Yeah, so usually our champion is actually a very non-technical person. So we're maybe a little bit different from some software purchases in that regard. Typically what happens, it's kind of what we call a line of business leader in a government agency. So it might be an elected official who wants to improve customer experience and get reelected for that, but it might also just be somebody who is running a Department of Motor Vehicles or a tax office or is a clerk of courts or things like that, and wants to make their government agency operate more efficiently, get higher kind of customer satisfaction, and so on. So they're typically not very technical. And what we find is they see the value in shifting people online and creating a more efficient way to collect that revenue. And then as we kind of go through a sales cycle, a more technical persona enters the chat, as it were, and kind of comes in and is assessing whether or not we are complementary to the other systems they have in place. Do we have the right security protocols in place, and so on and so forth.
Makes sense. Now, what would you say? How does the journey look like? How these persona, let's say more non-technical persona you mentioned, how do they learn about you guys? What's their journey looking like? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I'll give you a dual answer here. I have been with the business for about 10 months. And so things are really changing right now in terms of our acquisition and demand creation processes. But historically, we have really relied on kind of relationships, introductions, and then events to be kind of our primary ways in. So events have been particularly, really fruitful for us. Every government agency and every sort of profession within the public sector, they've all got different associations and things like that they participate in. And so there's lots of opportunities to kind of hit the alphabet soup of every event in every region in the United States and Canada, which are the places that we operate today. And then in addition, we've kind of, done sort of the snowball introduction approach of, hey, this worked really great in Grand Rapids, say, for example, which is one of our clients, and kind of getting introductions and referral traffic from there, using referral traffic in the analog sense, not the digital sense, right? The actual, we will go on the road with you and make introductions kind of sense. But over the last, 6 or 7 months, we have been investing in more of what I think of as a fulsome demand creation motion. So doing content marketing and thought leadership, We've invested in account-based marketing, which is a really good fit for government because maybe nowhere else is it more true than in government that people do not buy software by themselves. I don't think people ever buy software by themselves, at least not enterprise software, but certainly not in government. And so being able to sort of present our story and our point of view to all of those people who are kind of make a government buying group has started to drive more traffic to the website, more interest, more kind of engagement and repeat traffic as well. So we're really happy with kind of the early signals we're getting from that.
Very cool. Yeah, I was actually about to ask, like, what role do you think the website plays in the journey and will play moving forward?
Yeah, so the website historically, I think, was underserving the business. And there's multiple reasons for that. We weren't doing very much to drive traffic. I mean, sure, we had sort of the basic SEO components in place and some content and some case studies up there. But, what we found is investing in that has really, really made a difference, even in a very short period of time. So when we look at kind of our traffic patterns on the site, there was one stat, we in the first 2 months of this calendar year already seen triple the unique visits from kind of our ICP than we did in all of 2022. Now, there's probably some measurement error in there, right? Because we've also gotten a little bit more sophisticated in how we measure that traffic. But, when I shared that statistic with a couple of colleagues in our executive team, they said, what happened? I said, well, we started doing demand creation. And, so that is kind of an early impact.
Very good.
That being said, I think we still have a lot of work to do on the website. And so we are really investing in a refresh right now to really improve that experience because the website wasn't getting much traffic, so we didn't invest a lot in it. So the website didn't get much traffic. So on, sort of that, that vicious cycle. And so now that we're starting to really see that the website is going to play a big role, as it does in all of these things, we've invested in a refresh and are kind of currently underway in sort of the strategy, design, and copy of that process.
That sounds really good and sounds like you guys are on a very interesting journey. What would you consider sort of the current strength of the page versus where do you see room for improvement?
Well, it's hard. I mean, I think if you ask any marketing leader, especially if they're fairly new in role, they've always got mostly criticisms of the website instead of compliments or positive things to say. Probably the place where we are the strongest, and this is true about us as a business as a whole, is customer advocacy. So government buyers rely a lot on kind of peer reference. And because what we do is sort of unique, we're not in kind of a broad category. So like there isn't like a G2 category for what we do, for example. And so we really have to tell the kind of story of what we have done with other customers really, really prominently. Fortunately, our customers have been really happy with the results that they've gotten. And so we have a really, really nice library of case studies that really helps tell the story. And I think people are able, as they kind of come to the site and poke around, they're able to say, oh, there's someone like me. That's a city about the same size as us, or a county use case that's similar to what I need to solve for, or, oh, that's a state agency and so am I, and let's see what happened there. And so that's probably the biggest strength on the site. We have really focused on paring back some of the content that was on the site and some of the copy because it had gotten, a little bit, sort of like an untended garden. And so we gave it a good weeding. And so it's much simpler than it was 6 months ago. And we're really pleased with that. I think that's improving the user experience, but we've still got a lot of work to do.
Very cool. I'd love to switch gears a little bit, right? We talked about the page. I'd love to learn a little bit more about your daily sort of projects and work. How should we imagine like a typical day of Kelly if something like that exists?
I think that the role of a CMO is kind of a combination of how do you create orchestration, again, in the analog, not the technical sense, among all the different parts of marketing. I think one thing that a lot of times, this will probably resonate with your audience of marketers. People who don't live in marketing think of marketing as like this fungible resource. Oh, well, you've got 12 people, so, they're all the same. And then they also sort of think of it as maybe the arts and crafts department sometimes a little bit, or the make it pretty department. But pulling all those different skill sets together and getting design and content and demand strategy and the tech stack and all of those kind of bits and components or instruments in the orchestra, as it were, working together is a big piece of being an effective marketing leader. And so a lot of times what I'm trying to do is make sure that that's happening, remove barriers to that happening, help kind of think through process engineering to make that work better. And then I think the other piece that is something that I'm personally always working on is making sure that you're communicating marketing's value out into the business. So again, back to that, arts and crafts department analogy. If you are not in a proactive position talking about what you are actually doing and why that's important to the business and the impact you expect it to have, and then the impacts that it did have, that is where you get into kind of that kind of trap of they think you're the arts and crafts department or the make it pretty department on the one hand, or they think that you have an infinite resource and you can just do whatever they ask. Oh, I need this special one pager for my meeting with XYZ customer or whatever, and that you are just there waiting for somebody to call you and tell you what to do. Mm-hmm. So that kind of out into the business communication of this is what we're working on and why, and being really, really close in particular to product and to sales is the other probably, call that the other 40% of how I spend my time. And then there's probably 20% that is a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of everything else.
Very good. Very cool. I appreciate that insight. I got a couple of rapid fire questions to wrap it up for today as we're slowly approaching the end of the episode. Would you be ready for those?
Well, we'll find out, won't we?
What is the last book you read or the last podcast you listened to?
The last podcast I listened to was this week's episode of PayIt with Scott Galloway and Kara Swisher. Mm-hmm. And the last book I read was a book called I Have Some Questions for You. It's fiction by Rebecca Mackay. I am a novel junkie because that's how I unplug my brain. So I don't read a lot of nonfiction.
Mm-hmm. What's one single thing that your company is focused on the most at the moment?
Driving adoption among residents. So it's great for us to stand up software, but one of the things that we do is help our clients actually make those residents aware of it so that they can kind of shift out of those in-person channels and onto digital.
If there would be no boundaries in tech, what would be the one single thing that you would do to fix for your role as a marketer if you got a magic wand?
Oh, gosh. I would love to get to a place where I could say, stand me up a dashboard that will tell me these three things in the next, 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm. And for the very last question, let's do a bit of time travel. Let's go back to the days of Texas McCombs Business School. Now you're heading off that part of the educational journey. What would be one advice for yourself moving forward from there?
I think that I would tell my young self the same thing I tell myself today, which is that curiosity trumps having the answer every single time.
That's a very good advice. It's actually been a big theme of also here the Pathmonk team that curious people are definitely very, very great asset in the teams. Very cool. I really appreciate it, Kelly, that you've taken the time with us today to give us an insight about how PayIt works and how you think about growth. I want to give you the very last word. If somebody would be forgetting all that we discussed about PayIt, what's the one thing people should take away?
That we make government work more efficiently and enable them to connect more deeply and meaningfully with the residents they serve.
Thanks a lot for being a guest on Pathmonk Presents.
Thank you for having me.